My son banned me from his wedding but sent the $94,600 bill, so I paid the vendors directly. Narrator, Graham Ellis, 66, retired hotel financial controller. 3 days before my only son got married, he told me I was no longer welcome at the wedding because his fiance's family thought I was too ordinary for their guests. The next morning, he sent me a bill for $94,600. He expected anger, he expected pleading. Most of all, he expected a bank transfer. I sent him none of those things. Instead, I asked for the name of every florist, server, driver, musician, photographer, and dishwasher whose work was hidden inside that number. Then I paid the people who had actually earned the money. By the time I was finished, the wedding still happened, every legitimate vendor had been paid, and the bride's father was left trying to explain why $31,000 of the bill belonged to his own company and why another $12,000 had nothing to do with the wedding at all. My name is Graham Ellis. I'm 66 years old, and for 34 years I worked as the financial controller of the Alder House Hotel in the small Virginia city of Bellwether. That title sounds more impressive than the job usually looked. Most days I sat in an office behind the ballroom kitchen studying invoices under fluorescent lights. I matched purchase orders to deliveries. I traced missing deposits. I checked whether 200 linen napkins had actually arrived before authorizing payment for 200 linen napkins. I was the man a banquet manager called when a champagne invoice was 9 bottles too high, or when a supplier charged Saturday labor rates for a Thursday delivery. I learned that dishonest money rarely announces itself with a dramatic lie. Usually, it hides inside a respectable-looking total and hopes the person paying is too rushed, embarrassed, or trusting to ask for the pieces. My wife, Elaine, used to tease me about that. Graham can enjoy any party, she would say, as long as nobody lets him see the catering invoice. Elaine died 6 years before the wedding. Ovarian cancer took 11 months to do what I had spent 41 years believing nothing could do. Our son, Luke, was 31 then. For a while, grief made the two of us closer. He came by every Sunday. We ate Elaine's terrible frozen casseroles because neither of us had the heart to throw them away. We went through photographs together and argued about which of us had inherited her habit of closing our eyes at exactly the wrong moment. Luke was my only child. That fact made it easy for me to confuse love with permanent access. I assumed there would always be another Sunday, another cup of coffee, another reason for him to call that had nothing to do with money. 2 years later, he met Natalie Voss. Natalie was bright, polished, and ambitious. She worked in brand development for her father's consulting company, Voss Event Strategies. She could enter a room, remember 12 names, compliment the right person's watch, and leave with 3 invitations. I don't say that as criticism. It was a skill, and she was excellent at it. Luke changed around her family, but not all at once. First came the tailored jackets, then the private club dinners, then the way he began saying network when he used to say friends. None of that bothered me. A father who complains every time his adult son changes soon teaches that son to stop visiting. Natalie's father, Richard Voss, was the kind of man who spoke as if every conversation had already been summarized for investors. He called dinner relationship building. He called favors strategic alignment. The first time we met, he asked what I did. I'm a hotel controller, I said. Accounting? Mostly. He nodded once and moved on to someone who owned 3 dental practices. I didn't resent him for that. I had spent my career being underestimated by men who signed invoices without reading them. It made my job easier. When Luke and Natalie announced their engagement, I invited them to my house and gave them Elaine's champagne glasses. Natalie held one up to the light and said, "They were beautiful." Luke looked at the empty chair across from me, and for a moment he was my boy again. "Mom would have loved this," he said. "She would have started planning before you finished the sentence," I told him. Then I made my offer. "I can contribute $45,000 toward the wedding." Luke's mouth opened. Natalie lowered the glass. "Dad, that's too much." "It's what I can afford," I said. "It won't come out of the house, and it won't change my retirement. Your mother and I saved for things we might not get to see. I'd like to see this one." I chose the number carefully. I had a certificate of deposit maturing in May. After taxes, 45,000 was generous without being reckless. I also chose my wording carefully toward the wedding. I didn't promise a blank check. I didn't promise a honeymoon. I didn't promise cash to be divided among relatives. I promised to pay $45,000 of wedding expenses. Natalie came around the table and hugged me. Luke hugged me after her. For the next few weeks, I heard from them more often than I had in the previous year. At first, they planned a wedding for about 100 guests. Then Richard offered to open his network, and the list grew to 180. The community hall became the Alder House Ballroom, the same hotel where I had worked until retirement. A local photographer became a two-person editorial team. A playlist became a string quartet for cocktails and professional sound and lighting for the reception. I knew weddings grew. I had watched reasonable budgets become emotional hostage situations over chair covers. I didn't lecture them. I reminded Luke that my contribution was fixed at 45,000. Absolutely, he said. Richard is covering the upgrades. That sentence appeared several times over the next 4 months. Richard is covering the upgrades. Richard has a preferred vendor. Richard's people negotiated a package. Whenever I asked for contracts, Natalie said her father's office was consolidating everything. Whenever I offered to pay deposits directly, Luke told me there was no need yet. They'll send one reconciliation at the end, he explained. Whose end? I asked. He laughed as if I had made a joke. 2 months before the wedding, I had lunch with Luke at a diner near his office. I brought a thin folder containing my bank's transfer instructions and a simple page I had prepared with 3 columns: vendor, contract total, outstanding balance. Luke glanced at it and pushed it aside. Dad, you're retired. You don't have to turn this into an audit. It isn't an audit, it's a list. Natalie's dad does this professionally. Then he already has the list. Luke sighed. I'll ask. He never sent it. Still, our conversations remained friendly enough. I had been measured for a dark blue suit. Luke had asked me to arrive early for photographs. He gave me one task: bring Elaine's small silver locket, which he planned to pin inside his jacket so his mother could be with him. That nearly undid me. I had the locket cleaned. I placed it in the little velvet box she had kept in her dresser. For 2 weeks it sat beside my car keys, so I couldn't possibly forget it. Then 3 days before the ceremony, Luke called. It was Wednesday at 6:17 in the evening. I remember because I had just put a pan of chicken in the oven and set the timer. His name appeared on my phone, and I answered with, "If this is about the locket, it is already waiting by the door." He didn't respond. Luke? Dad, I need to talk to you about Saturday. There are tones a parent recognizes before the words arrive. I turned off the oven. Go ahead. The guest dynamics have gotten complicated. That didn't sound like my son. It sounded like Richard. What dynamics? Natalie's dad has clients coming. A state senator may be there, some people from the foundation. It's become more formal than we expected. I own a suit, Luke. That's not what I mean. Then say what you mean. I heard him breathe out. Somewhere behind him, a woman said something I couldn't make out. Natalie's family feels there's a gap, he said. Culturally, socially, they're worried you might not be comfortable. Are they worried I won't be comfortable, or are they worried their guests won't be comfortable with me? Silence. Luke? Richard used the phrase too plain. I told him it was unfair. And then? And then we talked about what would make the day easiest. I sat at my kitchen table. The velvet box was 6 feet away. Do you want me at your wedding? I asked. Dad, don't turn it into that. It is exactly that. I'm not asking what Richard wants. I'm asking what my son wants. His answer took 7 seconds. I counted each one on the face of the kitchen clock. I think it would be better if you didn't come. It is strange what the mind notices when something breaks. I noticed a ring of water under my glass. I noticed the refrigerator cycling off. I noticed that Luke had not said we. He had said you. All right, I told him. He sounded startled. All right? You're 37 years old. You're making a decision about your wedding. I understand the decision. I knew you'd be mature about this. That sentence hurt more than the disinvitation. He had mistaken my refusal to beg for approval. What about Mom's locket? He asked. I looked at the box. You can collect it tomorrow if you still want it. I do. Of course I do. Then text before you come. We ended the call. My chicken sat in the cold oven until almost midnight. At 8:42 the next morning, an email arrived from an address at Voss Event Strategies. The subject line read, Final Family Contribution Settlement, Ellis/Voss Wedding. The attachment was one page. At the top was the logo of Richard's company. Under it were the words Consolidated Event Expenditure and Family Allocation. At the bottom, in bold type, was the amount due from Graham Ellis, $94,600. Payment was requested by 2 o'clock that afternoon. The wiring instructions belonged to Voss Event Strategies. I read the page twice. There were only three categories. Venue and vendor package, $51,600. Event strategy and family brand coordination, $31,000. Travel and hospitality reserve, $12,000. Total, $94,600. No vendor names, no contract dates, no deposits, no invoice numbers, no explanation for why my $45,000 promise had more than doubled overnight. At 8:49, Luke texted me. Richard's office sent the final number. Please handle today so nothing gets disrupted. 7 minutes after banning me from the wedding, metaphorically speaking, my son had remembered I existed as an accounts payable department. I didn't call him. Anger is useful information, but it is a terrible auditor. I opened a new spreadsheet, then I replied to the email. Thank you. Before payment, please provide the complete vendor ledger, executed contracts, deposit history, current balances, and remittance instructions for each provider. I will review immediately. Richard answered 12 minutes later. Graham, timing is critical. We have consolidated these obligations to simplify the process. One transfer will close the account, I wrote back. A consolidated total does not identify the obligations. Please send the supporting documents. At 9:18, Luke called. Why are you making this difficult? I asked for invoices. The wedding is in 2 days. Then the invoices already exist. Richard put months of work into this. I'm sure he can locate them. Luke lowered his voice. You said you wanted to help us. I promised $45,000. You know the budget changed? Your budget changed. My promise did not. So this is because of last night. I paused. Part of me wanted to say yes. Part of me wanted him to understand that choices had consequences, but the truth was cleaner. Last night is why I will not discuss money informally anymore, I said. The invoice is why I will not send $94,600 to a company that did not cater, decorate, photograph, or host your wedding. You're punishing Natalie. No, I am verifying a bill. Dad, send the documents. At 10:06, a link arrived containing 23 files. Whoever assembled the folder assumed volume would discourage attention. There were menu revisions, lighting diagrams, seating charts, insurance certificates, 2 copies of the same floral proposal, and an outdated room block. But beneath the clutter were the 7 contracts I needed. I printed them. The Alder House had contracted for the ballroom, dinner, service staff, and non-alcoholic beverages at $25,800. A deposit of $3,800 had been paid. Balance due, $22,000. Willow and Pine Floral had a contract for $8,400. Deposit paid, $1,400. Balance due, $7,000. Northline Sound and Lighting, $6,700 total, $700 paid, $6,000 due. Hearthstone Photography, $5,900 total, $400 paid, $5,500 due. Marlowe Cake Studio, $2,400 total, $200 paid, $2,200 due. Parker Shuttle Company, $1,400 total, $100 paid, $1,300 due. The Bellwether String Quartet, $1,000 with the full amount due on Friday. The contracts totaled $51,600. Deposits already paid totaled $6,600. The remaining legitimate balances totaled exactly $45,000. I stared at the number for a long moment. It was not a coincidence. Someone had built the actual wedding around the amount I had promised, then placed $43,000 of unrelated charges on top, and hoped embarrassment would make me pay before asking questions. I turned to the $31,000 event strategy and family brand coordination fee. There was no contract for it, no scope of work, no hourly record, no outside planner listed in the vendor folder. The seating charts had been created by Natalie. Emails showed that the venue's banquet manager had coordinated deliveries. The only invoice for $31,000 was the single-page statement from Voss Event Strategies, the company Richard owned. The $12,000 travel and hospitality reserve was easier. Buried inside a PDF labeled Guest Logistics was a booking confirmation for 6 nights at the Azure Meridian Resort in St. Lucia. 2 business class tickets, oceanfront suite, private airport transfer. The travelers were Luke Ellis and Natalie Voss. The word honeymoon did not appear on Richard's invoice. It did not need to. At 11:37, I called my former assistant at the Alder House, a woman named Denise Harper, who had become the hotel's controller after I retired. I did not ask her for confidential information. I told her I was an authorized wedding contributor, read her the contract number Luke had provided, and asked whether the hotel's outstanding balance was $22,000. Yes, she said, due tomorrow at noon. Does your balance include a fee payable to Voss Event Strategies? No. Does the hotel require payment through Voss Event Strategies? Absolutely not. I asked whether I could pay the hotel directly and have the receipt issued to the wedding account. She said yes. Then she became quiet. Graham, is everything all right? I looked at the suit hanging on my bedroom door. The arithmetic will be, I said. I called the other 6 vendors one by one. I gave each the couple's names, the event date, and the contract number. I asked only 3 questions. What is your remaining balance? Is that balance for services actually ordered under the signed contract? Can I pay you directly today? Every answer matched my spreadsheet. The florist sounded relieved. The couple had changed the centerpieces twice, and she had already purchased the flowers. The shuttle company was a husband and wife operation with 3 drivers scheduled. The quartet had turned down another event to hold Saturday afternoon. These were not numbers on Richard's allocation. They were people who had bought materials, reserved time, hired staff, and trusted that a signed promise meant something. At 12:24, I emailed Luke, Natalie, and Richard. Because the original invoice had come from the company's accounts receivable address, my reply also went there. I have completed my review. The contracted wedding services total $51,600. Deposits of $6,600 have already been paid, leaving legitimate vendor balances of $45,000. This equals the contribution I promised Luke and Natalie. Today, I will pay each named vendor directly and in full. I will not pay the $31,000 charge from Voss Event Strategies because no executed contract, scope of work, or supporting record has been provided. I will not pay the $12,000 travel charge because it is a honeymoon expense, not a wedding vendor obligation. My contribution will therefore remain $45,000 as agreed. I attached the reconciliation. Richard called before I could close the spreadsheet. You had no right to contact those vendors, he said. They disagreed. You are interfering with an event my company is managing. Then send me the management contract. This is a family arrangement. Your invoice came from a company. He paused. The $31,000 reflects months of planning, introductions, negotiated rates, and the reputational value attached to my relationships. Who agreed to buy that from you? You are benefiting from it. I am not attending. That silenced him for a second. This petty response is precisely why we were concerned about your presence, he said. Richard, I spent 34 years paying hotel invoices. If asking who performed a service is petty, then I made a career of pettiness. The fee is part of the family's total obligation. It is not part of mine. You're going to humiliate your son over $43,000? No, I said. I'm going to keep a $45,000 promise. The resort balance is due tomorrow. Then the travelers should decide whether they can afford the trip. His voice hardened. If you do this, there will be consequences. There already were, I said. They arrived yesterday at 6:17. I ended the call. For the next 2 hours, I paid vendors. The hotel received an electronic transfer of $22,000. The florist and photographer accepted bank payments. The sound company and shuttle company took cards. The cake studio asked me to come by with a cashier's check because its online system had locked them out after too many failed password attempts. I drove there, paid $2,200, and left with a receipt that smelled faintly of vanilla. The quartet's manager sent a payment link. At 2:43 that afternoon, the last $1,000 charge cleared. $45,000. Not 1 cent went to Luke. Not 1 cent went to Richard. Every cent went to someone whose name appeared on a signed contract. I emailed the receipts to the couple and copied each vendor only on the line that concerned them. I did not mention the disinvitation. I did not accuse anyone of fraud. I wrote, "All contracted vendor balances are now paid. I wish the couple a smooth event." Luke called 6 times. I let the first 5 go to voicemail. On the 6th, I answered. "You copied Richard's bookkeeper," he said. I replied to the address that billed me. "Her name is Marissa. She handles their company accounts." She started asking questions about the fee. "That sounds like her job." "Richard says you're implying he did something illegal." I wrote that no contract or supporting record was provided. If he has one, he can provide it. Natalie is crying. Is she crying because the florist won't come? No. Because the venue canceled? No. Because the photographer wasn't paid? You know that's not it. Then she is not crying about the wedding, Luke. She is crying about the honeymoon. He said nothing. "Did you know the St. Lucia trip was included in the bill sent to me?" I asked. Another silence. That day contained many silences, but this one gave me an answer. "Natalie said her dad had found a way to include it in the family package," he finally said. "A way to include it without calling it a honeymoon? We thought you might help more once you saw the full total. You thought I would pay $94,600 the morning after you told me I was too plain to attend. It wasn't about you being plain. Then what was it about? Keeping peace. With whom?" He didn't answer. I looked at Elaine's locket, still waiting in its box. "Are you coming to get your mother's locket?" I asked. "I don't know." "Let me know by tomorrow at noon." He never came. Friday morning, the Azure Meridian Resort canceled the reservation when the final $12,000 payment did not arrive. Luke had used a refundable hold, so they did not lose money. They lost the room, the business class seats, and the version of their honeymoon they had planned for other people to finance. The $31,000 fee caused a different kind of trouble. Marissa, the bookkeeper at Voss Event Strategies, had received the invoice only after it was sent to me. Richard had instructed her to record the amount as consulting revenue once my payment arrived. My email forced her to ask for an engagement agreement, proof of services, and the correct client name. There was no agreement, there was no purchase order, there was not even a clear answer about whether the supposed client was me, Luke, Natalie, or Richard's own family. Marissa refused to post it without documentation. Richard could have withdrawn the invoice quietly. Instead, pride made him defend it. By Friday afternoon, he had explained the charge to his bookkeeper, his business partner, his wife, his daughter, and my son. Each explanation was different. To Marissa, it was a legitimate planning fee. To his partner, it was reimbursement for relationship development expenses. To his wife, it was a way to recover what he had spent on deposits. To Natalie, it was money Graham had already agreed to contribute. To Luke, it was simply what wealthy families did when they combined wedding costs. None of those explanations matched the documents. Richard eventually canceled the invoice. His partner required that future related party bills receive a second approval. That was the explanation he had to live with, not in front of strangers at a ballroom, but in the office where he had built his image as the man who always understood the deal. Saturday arrived bright and cool. At 3 in the afternoon, I put on the dark blue suit anyway. I wish I could tell you I did it because I was completely at peace. I wasn't. I did it because the alternative was sitting in an old shirt and pretending the day meant nothing. I placed Elaine's locket in my inside pocket, then I drove to the cemetery. "He's getting married today," I told her. The sentence sounded absurd spoken to a stone, but I kept talking. I told her about the flowers, the ballroom, and the string quartet. I did not tell her our son had excluded me. Not at first. I sat on the bench beside her grave for 20 minutes before I could say it aloud. He asked me not to come. There was no answer, of course, but marriage trains you to hear what someone would say even after they are gone. Elaine would not have told me to cancel the wedding. She would not have told me to pay the hidden charges either. She would have said, protect the innocent people, keep your word, and let Luke carry his own choice. That was what I had tried to do. At 4 o'clock, the florist sent me a photograph, not of the couple, just the ballroom before guests entered. White flowers climbed slender brass stands. The tables glowed under warm lights. On the far wall, the sound crew had projected Luke and Natalie's initials. Everything is ready, she wrote. Thank you for making sure the vendors were taken care of, I replied. You earned it. Have a good evening. Then I turned off my phone. I ate dinner alone at a small Italian restaurant Elaine and I had liked. The hostess asked whether I was celebrating something because of the suit. My son got married today, I said. Congratulations. Thank you. I meant it. Pain and love can occupy the same chair. The wedding happened exactly as it should have for the people who were invited. Dinner was served, the cake was cut, the quartet played, the shuttle drivers carried guests back to their hotels. No worker was asked to absorb the cost of my family's argument. Richard gave a toast about generosity and shared values. I know because Luke sent me the video 2 weeks later. Their honeymoon became 4 nights at a rented beach condo 3 hours away. There was nothing wrong with the condo. Under different circumstances, it might have been a lovely trip. But Natalie had spent months posting hints about St. Lucia, and the sudden change produced questions she did not enjoy answering. Luke contacted me the Monday after the wedding. His first message said, "Hope you're satisfied." I did not answer. His second said, "You made Natalie's family look dishonest." I replied, "I made a list of what I was asked to pay." Then there was silence for nearly a month. On a rainy Sunday in October, Luke appeared at my door. He looked tired. Marriage had not transformed him into a different person, but the wedding had forced him to see several versions of the people around him, including himself. I let him in. He noticed the velvet box on the entry table. "You kept it there?" he asked. "For a while. Then it felt wrong to move it." He sat at the kitchen table where I had received his call. "Natalie says you did all of this to embarrass her dad." I paid the wedding bills. "You knew the company would question the fee." "I knew a company that sent an invoice might keep accounting records." He rubbed both hands over his face. "Richard said the fee was supposed to offset what he contributed. Then he should have contributed less. He should not have billed me for an amount he chose to spend. He says families move money around like that all the time." "Not mine." Luke looked toward the window. "The trip wasn't my idea." "But you knew it was on the bill." "I found out the night before." "And you still asked me to pay it." He nodded once. I could have made a speech then. I had rehearsed several during the weeks he was silent. None sounded useful with my son sitting 3 feet away. "Why didn't you want me at the wedding?" I asked. "I did." "That is not what you said." Natalie was under pressure. Her dad said some of his clients knew you from the hotel and might think the event wasn't on their level. I almost laughed. "They knew me from the hotel because I worked there." "I know." "Did you think I would carry trays into the ballroom?" "No." "Did you think I would tell guests what the wine cost?" "Dad, stop." "I'm trying to understand what danger my presence created." His eyes filled, but I did not rescue him from the question. "You didn't create a danger," he said. "I was afraid of starting my marriage with her family against me. I thought you would forgive me because you always do." There it was. Not cruelty, not confusion, calculation. He had measured the cost of disappointing both families and chosen the parent he believed would continue paying after being discarded. "I probably will forgive you," I said. "That is different from pretending it did not happen. I'm sorry. Are you sorry you excluded me, or sorry the invoice failed?" He looked down. "Both." It was not the perfect answer. It was honest enough to begin with. I pushed the velvet box across the table. "Your mother wanted you to have this." He opened it and cried. I did not. Some people might think that means I was cold. The truth is, I had spent my tears 3 days before the wedding, alone in a kitchen beside a cold oven. By the time Luke came home, what I felt was heavier and quieter. He thanked me for the locket. He did not thank me for the $45,000. I did not ask him to. That money had never purchased a seat at the wedding. It had never purchased obedience, affection, or public recognition. It was a promise I made before I learned how little my presence was valued. I kept it because my character should not change every time someone else reveals theirs. But I also learned something about generosity. Generosity without boundaries does not always make people grateful. Sometimes it simply teaches them to include your money in plans that exclude you. Luke and Natalie stayed married. The first year was difficult. Richard's control did not end with the wedding, and Luke's willingness to surrender did not disappear after one apology. I kept my distance from their arguments. When they visited, they came to my house. When they asked for financial help, I required a clear purpose and paid any provider directly. Some requests disappeared as soon as cash was no longer an option. Richard and I have not spoken since the day of the invoices. At a charity reception the following spring, he saw me across the room and turned toward another group. I did not follow him. A man who invents a $31,000 fee can also invent a reason not to meet your eyes. Marissa, his bookkeeper, later became controller at another firm. Denise mentioned it to me over coffee. I hope the new company appreciates a woman willing to ask for a contract when the boss would prefer silence. As for the wedding workers, they did their jobs and went home paid. That matters to me more than the canceled resort suite. The florist did not have to choose between her payroll and my pride. The drivers did not lose a Saturday's income because my son failed a moral test. The musicians did not become collateral damage in a family dispute they knew nothing about. I had the power to cancel payments and let the entire event collapse. For one angry hour, I imagined doing exactly that. It would have produced a louder ending. Richard would have been humiliated in front of his clients. Luke would have remembered the consequences forever. But revenge that strikes everyone is not precision. It is just wreckage. So I chose the narrower consequence. My son wanted a wedding without his ordinary father. He got one. Richard wanted my money to pass through his company without questions. It did not. The newlyweds wanted a luxury honeymoon disguised as a wedding expense. They lost it. The people who did honest work wanted to be paid. They were. And I wanted to keep the promise I had made when I still believed I would be standing beside my son. I kept exactly $45,000 worth of it. Not a dollar less and not a dollar more. I still have the dark blue suit. I have worn it twice since then. Once to Denise's retirement party at the hotel and once to dinner with Luke on what would have been Elaine's 70th birthday. Luke noticed it that second time. "Is that the suit?" he asked. "It is." He looked ashamed. I did not tell him he should be. Shame is useful only if the person carrying it decides to become different. We ordered Elaine's favorite dessert and shared it. Luke told me he had started counseling. He said he was learning that keeping peace is not the same as surrendering the person least likely to leave. "I knew you would still be here," he said. "I am," I answered, "but I won't always be standing in the same place you left me." That is where our relationship remains. Not repaired, not destroyed, honest. If Luke ever has children, I hope I will know them. I hope he teaches them that a simple man in an inexpensive suit can still recognize an expensive lie. I hope he tells them their grandmother's locket reached his pocket even though their grandfather did not reach the wedding. Most of all, I hope he remembers the lesson hidden inside that $94,600 bill. You can remove someone from your guest list. You can choose status over loyalty. You can even decide that the father who raised you is too plain to stand in your photographs, but you cannot erase him from the family and keep him on the invoice.